for her statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation. Distinguished Mr. President, we would like to thank the Special Envoy, Mr. Griffiths, for his review of the political and humanitarian situation in Yemen. We are grateful for the report by Mr. Mark Lowcock, USG for Humanitarian Affairs. Russia very much commends the brave work in the country of all humanitarian agencies. We would like to thank Ambassador Rhonda King for her report on the work of the Yemen Sanctions Committee. We continue to closely follow the situation in Yemen. It moves, it's volatile. There are both glimmers of hopes in progress in the settlement process and also signs of escalation of violence. Once again, the Yemen sides have moved into the confrontation stage. We are seeking that there be a stabilization of the situation, whereas at the beginning of this year, we were pleased to talk about a decrease in hostilities and airstrikes. Today, we have to note that armed hostilities once again have intensified with dire humanitarian consequences. We are convinced that there can be no military solution in Yemen. We agree with Mr. Griffiths and the Yemeni parties that a final outcome format should be based on mutual compromise. We support the Special Envoy in all the tracks of his mediation efforts. We welcome peace initiatives to help assist the Yemeni parties in their dialogue. We consider it's important for the central role in settlement in this country to be played by the UN and to be respected by the parties. The guiding principle here should be the principle of the respect for the sovereignty and independence and the territorial integrity of Yemen. We note the steps taken by Saudi Arabia to transform the active phase of the conflict in Yemen into the negotiation phase. We consider it is important to fully uphold all of the provisions of the Riyadh agreement, because what needs to be achieved needs to be achieved by the Yemen people. We are convinced that the way forward to solving problems is possible through an inclusive dialogue of all Yemeni forces without exception. As is the case with other conflicts, we believe that the Yemenis themselves should determine the future of their country and take into consideration the opinion of all strata of society. We will continue to provide assistance to UN mediation efforts in Yemen. This includes through our contacts with all political forces in the country and interested parties, both in our national capacity and as a permanent member of the Security Council. Our work helps the fact that we have a historical basis, we have friendly relations with Yemen, with its people, and we note the agreement between the parties to start a medical air bridge to transport Yemenis needing medical care. We deem this to be an important humanitarian initiative which not only provides practical assistance to a population in need, but also can serve to be an important channel to build trust between the parties. Another similar measure was the agreement reached on prisoner exchanges, and this needs to be developed in practice. The parties to the conflict need to continue to move in this direction. We welcome the efforts of everyone involved in ensuring these agreements were successful. At the moment, there is a ceasefire in the Hodeidah region. There is the continuing practice of entry and unloading of commercial ships and their cargo. We must ensure that Hodeidah and the positive efforts there, which were the result of long-term efforts, we must ensure that that is not destabilized. The international community must continue to make collective efforts to put the conflict on a political track and to provide the necessary assistance to the Yemeni people that is in dire need of humanitarian assistance. We are convinced that such a development will serve not only to benefit Yemen, but also will ensure security of all neighboring states. Because armed hostilities in Yemen are something that benefit terrorist groups alone. We would call on everybody to pool their efforts to fight this terrorist threat. In April this year, in April of this year, we are going to be commemorating the 5th anniversary of the start of the Yemen conflict. This needs to be brought to an end. This tragic Time must remind everybody to get involved with the political process and to find a compromise on difficult questions, to find settlement that has been pointed out in his report by Mr. Griffiths. We agree with the special envoy. All of these matters it can be solved with the necessary political will. The Yemens must find sufficient efforts to pool their ranks in the benefit of their own people to make it into a contemporary, prosperous state that gives prospects to all. The 5-year-old war in Yemen must encourage external players to consolidate their positions and to help the Yemeni parties and help the UN to find compromise as well. Instead of finding perpetrators, it is better to come back to impartial diplomatic work and, in fact, to support the work of Mr. Griffiths. We consider it's harmful and counterproductive to stoke anti-Iranian rhetoric. We would like to remind you in this regard of resolution of the Security Council 598. This requested the UN Secretary General, in cooperation with regional states, to develop a security architecture in the region. In this regard, we draw attention to the relevant Russian concept for collective security in the Persian Gulf region. We urge everyone to come together to study it and to develop joint measures to de-escalate tensions in the region. With constructive ideas, there has been the diplomacy of France, and they have put forward their idea. That needs to be considered. We are all aware of the proposal made by the leadership of Iran. A creative synthesis of these ideas would establish a genuine basis for international cooperation. Starting such cooperation would help to stop the war in Yemen. It would improve the situation in the Persian Gulf, and it would establish dialogue between Arab states and Iran. We see no alternative to such an approach. Thank you very much indeed.
Je remercie le représentant.
I thank the representative of the Russian